Leela has always wondered where she came from. As an orphan, and the only one-eyed alien on the planet, she never even knew where to begin. But when she happens to meet another Cyclops online, that all begins to change. He introduces himself as Alcazar, and invites her to visit him at his home, the planet Cyclopia. Leela, Fry, and Bender arrive at the provided coordinates to find a beautiful city fallen into ruin, and Alcazar is the only one there. He takes Leela on a fascinating tour of her homeworld, showing what remains of their once great capital city. But he also warns her and the others they must never, ever enter the Forbidden Valley. After the tour, when Alcazar takes them to his palace, he explains that their planet was attacked years ago, and he was the sole survivor. But, he adds, before the disaster, a single baby was sent away in a rocket, and he believes that child was Leela. Alas, Leela and Alcazar are the last of their species, and the Cyclops race dies with them. But Leela dries her tears and leads them to bed. They are the last, but they don't have to be. Perhaps someday they will have children of their own. Fry, however, is suspicious. Something about Alcazar doesn't feel right. He sneaks off to investigate the Forbidden Valley, only to fall into a trapdoor and be ejected back to Alcazar's palace. Meanwhile, now that Leela has committed herself to Alcazar for the good of their species, he begins to act demanding and abusive towards her, treating her like his property and humiliating her. When she tries to break up with him, he reminds her that the fate of their race rests on them remaining together and pressures her into marriage. On the day of the wedding, Fry and Bender once again sneak into the Forbidden Valley, and they are shocked by what they find. 4 more palaces, each identical to Alcazar's. The only difference is the artwork and statues in each depicts a different strange alien race. As the wedding gears up, Fry and Bender return and bring forth their objections. Behind them follow 4 alien women, each claiming Alcazar promised to marry them as well. A flustered Alcazar involuntarily relieves his true nature as a shapeshifter. Cyclopia's fake, and Alcazar was never a Cyclops. He was manipulating all of these women with lies. After his victims all take their anger out by physically beating the scumbag, the professor reassures Leela that her job as a starship captain will give her plenty of opportunities to search for her real home. Somewhere in the universe, out amongst the billions of stars, it waits for her to find it. Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, where the future is in the past.
Welcome to the joys of the internet.
Of the 2000s internet.
Now modified to fit your primitive screen.
Man, there were some really dated jokes in that whole scene, like the professor opening it with, several years ago I tried to log on to AOL and it just went through, which is a dated joke for multiple reasons.
Honestly, that joke kind of still holds up today.
It all depends on where you are.
Yeah, well, it's just like no one uses AOL anymore, and for the most part, internet speeds are much faster. Hell, I'm willing to bet there are people alive now who don't even know what AOL was.
Yeah, but I mean, the joke that kind of be that he's still using dial-up, which there are people that do. There are people that still have dial-up.
Yeah, like him saying, please sign off, I need to use the phone, and then even later, exactly. Leela getting the, you've got mail. Just so many old dial-up and AOL jokes. Yeah. Meanwhile, this aired in, 2000?
Yeah, this is 2000.
Yeah, I think this was around the time that my family, personally, was actually upgrading away from dial-up.
Yeah.
Though, of course, I doubt they could have imagined, just how far we've gotten in just a few decades.
To the point that you could just straight up stream this show from the internet.
And record a podcast talking about it afterward.
Yeah.
But the whole, my God, it's full of ads, which of course is a direct 2001 reference.
The irony, it's complete with the music, but the irony there is that is the most famous line from 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it was not in the movie. That line is not anywhere in the movie, it's only in the book. Right. And most people don't even know that there is a book.
And yet every parody has him say something like that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's full of stars, or it's full of ads.
Though I'd say that joke is the least dated, considering how many ads we still have on the internet.
Yes, but you look at it as the early 2000s was the days before ad block, so you would get pop-up ads, you would get self-sustaining ads that would repeat themselves. There were websites that would specifically open up a window that would bounce around your screen saying you are an idiot, and if you click it, it splits in half into two windows that now bounce around and each do the same thing. And the only way to stop it was to just shut down your browser from the start menu.
Yeah, pop-up ads used to be just endemic, but of course nowadays a lot of browsers come with a pop-up blocker built in.
Mm.
So advertising is, a very different thing. Like, hell, I remember when I was first really using the internet on a daily basis in like the mid-2000s, you would get, banner ads that make noise. Like you would go onto a web page and you would see like a flashing banner at the top, and you would even hear coming through your speakers, just congratulations, you've been selected to win a free iPod Nano.
Yeah.
And then they upgraded to 2 free iPod Nanos.
I mean, you'll still see them now and again, but they're not nearly as obnoxious as they used to be.
When that happens, I immediately leave the website. I don't care what I was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I very rarely see advertising anymore unless it's like sponsored content. But, I browse with a combination of a pop-up blocker, uBlock Origin, plus no script. So,
yeah. So, I mean, the big problem really right now, if we can go off on this tangent, the big problem with ads is that we're fighting sort of an arms race between the pop-up blockers and the anti-pop-up blockers. And it's like, look, you're the ones who escalated this. You're the ones who started to shove the ads into pop-ups, into talking ads, and we're taking efforts to prevent them, and we're taking efforts to protect ourselves. You're the ones who had to escalate this. We're the ones that are taking efforts. So if you get off if you stop trying to shove this stuff down our throats, we will be happy to disable ad block as long as your ads are unobtrusive, stuff that's in the sidebar, stuff that's relevant to our interests, without necessarily delving in, because that's the other problem. Is like we have like stuff like tracking, like Google, will track your interests and serve you ads based on that. That's where the whole problem with loss of privacy comes from, not with governments, trying to solve crimes and shit and persecute people for stuff they haven't done. But no, it's advertisers trying to find information.
Well, let's be real. In some parts of the world, the government being invasive with it is also a problem.
Oh, definitely.
True, but not so much in America. The biggest problem is from advertisers just trying to get information about you to better serve you ads. It really is just, it comes down to capitalism. But the fact is that they have these things as like, please disable your ad block to view this page. It's like, no, well, I'll disable ad block when you start vetting the ads that don't try to install malware, don't talk, don't bounce around, don't try to do this kind of shit. So once your ads can go through that system, we'll happily disable ad block. Well, some of us will. A lot of us will just go, no, we don't want ads. We don't want to see ads ever. Which is the other side of the problem. People are like, everything on the internet should be free. I shouldn't have to pay for anything. I shouldn't have to view ads. I shouldn't have anything that stopped me from consuming this stuff without paying anything. I don't want to even see pre-roll ads in YouTube channels because that means the YouTuber is just doing it for money. It's like, no, the YouTuber needs to make a living, otherwise you don't make your fucking videos.
Yeah.
We all have to do our thing under capitalism. We gotta do what you gotta do. Something capitalism bad. But TC, when you run into those things where it's like, please turn off your ad blocker to view this page, no script generally no-sells those, so you can just view the page anyway because it prevents that script from triggering.
Which, again, is part of the arms race. Like,
yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to you don't want to stop these websites from getting their revenue, especially if they're doing things that you like, that you want to support. But of course, that's where things like Patreon come into play. But then not everybody can do that sort of thing. A lot of times they can only contribute fractions of a penny by viewing ads. So if you want to use AdSense and if that sort of thing works, then the problem is a lot of these websites are doing such abusive ads that you install ad block and then you end up blocking even and helping support websites that you do like that are serving unobtrusive ads. And then of course when they ask you to whitelist them, it's like, no, you're just one of those other websites that are asking me to whitelist them so you can serve me abusive ads. So no. So it really is just a frustrating thing that the people that are willing to compromise are completely outshined by the people who just want to get squeezed a little bit more out of you, and it's really fucking annoying.
Well, did you hear that a few years ago, the guy who invented pop-up ads literally apologized for it?
Yeah, and good on him.
Yeah, I just found the article from Forbes in 2014. Ethan Zuckerman, the man who invented pop-up ads, apologized to the world. He explained that he had unintentionally created it. Apparently, in the late 90s, he worked for a website that marketed content, but they tried a number of revenue streams, but it all came to the advertising. And as he explained, what ended up happening was it was a way to associate an ad with a user's page without putting it directly on the page, so that advertisers could have their ads shown without creating a mental association with the page's content. So if you bought a banner ad in a page with sexual content, you don't want that association. That was the original purpose of a pop-up ad, but then it ended up becoming used and weaponized for so many bad things, and that wasn't his intention. So so a couple of years ago he just publicly apologized for it.
And then of course that after that point there was the new movement of pop under advertising, where it doesn't pop up, it pops up on the window behind it. So that when you finally close your browser, the ads are all there, taking up your processor speed, and of course talking to you.
Yeah, I remember being a kid and spending time on Neopets or whatever other website I was on at that time, Flash aggregate sites, and getting those, pop-up ads, and every 10 minutes, congratulations, you won a free iPod Nano, free singles in your area want to meet you, just God, really?
Free singles in low Earth orbit want to meet you. And then of course you would have the problem with, click here to download these free emojis, it's really just a scheme to be able to serve you pop-ups, which happens now mostly. You don't see it so much on computers. You absolutely do see it on computers still, but it's mostly on phones now. And my mom will, I'll look at my mom's phone and she'll have an ad running in her lock menu.
Oy.
And it's no. When that happens, you installed something wrong. You need to immediately disable that, because that is not something that happens.
God.
And there's people that just accept that they have ads, that they have an ad on their phone, because it's just, there's advertising everywhere. Why wouldn't there be ads on the lock screen? It's no, that is the line that they do not cross. You paid for that phone. You do not get ads. Which if you people don't know, I run a subreddit called Asshole Design. And we are always talking about these sort of things, and we have this. I'm a huge advocate of the whole right to repair movement and just unobtrusive advertising. These companies are allowed to make money, but they're not allowed to abuse us for it. That's the big thing. So there's ones that get ads on their TV, within the UI of the smart TV itself.
God, yeah, that is one reason I will probably never upgrade to a smart TV. The other reason being that they very rarely update the firmware, even if there's a major security flaw, just because they know a TV is a really expensive appliance. So, if you're not happy with them not updating the firmware to correct security, what are you going to do? Spend $1,000 on another TV? You're locked in, baby. So, yeah, if you buy a TV with smart features, don't use them. Just, stream through a video game console or something.
Yeah.
Because those at least get regular firmware updates. Although, speaking of video game consoles, so many modern consoles have, also, put freaking ads on your, home screens and menus, and I hate that.
Yeah, which, thankfully, the Nintendo Switch, I have not noticed anything that it does that. So one kudos to Nintendo can do. I have not really, if it has happened on my PS4 or PS5, it does happen on my PS5. It's I don't use it as often, mostly because I only have 2 games for it at this point, but it happens. It's just one of those things that you have to just ignore. But even then, if you don't connect to the internet, usually you don't get them so much.
Yeah.
Because what are they going to serve from?
On the Switch, they post like news posts onto your lock screen, but it's generally like
and you can like you can unsubscribe from those. I subscribe to them because I legitimately want to keep up on what Nintendo's releasing and stuff. But
one thing with the Switch, though, I remember, I don't know if it was like a year or so ago, that they enabled Google Analytics onto it. And, as soon as that, became a thing, I see posts on my timeline about how to disable it.
Oy.
Yeah, so if you don't have it disabled, I recommend going into your settings and disabling it.
I was not aware of that. Thank you for informing me. I think the first time I'd ever seen something like this on a game console, though, was the Xbox 360. I've never owned one, but my younger brother did, and, when we were still living with our parents, I remember at one point, because for the longest time, it didn't have ads. It was just a regular, user interface, and then the Kinect came out, and they redid the entire home screen to be more designed for the Kinect.
It's called the NXT, yeah.
I think it was around that time that they also started adding ads to the home screen. And I remember seeing that and being horrified. Like, are you kidding me?
It's like, I missed the Blade menu. Who remembers the Blade menu?
Was that what they called the one before then?
The very early one. The one that had, like, the stuff that slid across the screen.
That might be the one I'm remembering. It might not have been, because this was a ways into the 360's lifespan that my brother finally got one. So, like, we were not there during the Dead Rising controversy where the game was unplayable without an HD TV and few people had them.
Oh, yeah, like, where the text was all tiny, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the same sort of thing happened with Dead Space.
Well, by the time we had a console from that generation, we had a HD TV. So, anyway, so
back on the episode.
Yeah. So, Zoidberg, going wild at an adult ad for sardine on mackerel action. I didn't want to know Zoidberg's fetishes, but I guess I do now.
I mean, Zoidberg being into that sort of stuff isn't that surprising.
He's a crab is into fish, sure.
It's like calling a cat alien a furry.
Right.
Well, I mean, except he's a lobster. He's not a fish.
He's a chitin-y.
Oh, God damn it.
But on the topic of, the more adult space on the internet, it still very much exists, of course, but, there's a lot of major sites that are cracking down on that sort of content, and that's really frustrating, not just for, artists, but sex workers as well,
Yeah.
I remember reading somewhere that porn websites are actually one of the least likely to give you malware.
Interesting.
Like legitimate porn websites, the ones that you actually have to pay like a subscription to log on to, they're one of the least likely to give you malware.
Well, I mean, if it's a subscription-based thing, that makes sense. But, like, in terms of, like, mainstream sites cracking down on this, yeah, like, I don't necessarily go to Twitter or whatever for adult content, but adult content and sex workers are generally the canary in the coal mine before crackdowns on queer folks and, any controversial anything. And it is not a good look.
And like Apple I don't know if you saw this thing about Apple, but they recently announced that they are going to automatically scan photos on the iPhone for anything involving like child pornography.
Yeah, I heard about that. And
like, I'm not defending pedophiles, but stay the fuck out of our photos.
Yeah, it feels like they're just doing that thing where you use a good cause that, something that no one can really object to. We want to protect children in order
exactly.
to...
If you try to stand up to, like, this is scanning your phone for child pornography, and it's like, don't scan my phone. It's like, why? Do you have child pornography on your phone? It's like, that's not the fucking point.
Yeah, they're doing that common thing where they use something, in this case, child abuse, that nobody can object to trying to deal with, but they're only using it as an excuse to try to normalize being invasive and horrible. In this case, trying to normalize the idea of companies having access to the files on your personal phone. Not even the stuff you have in the cloud, which frankly they shouldn't be looking at anyway, but just on your local device. And that is a hard fucking line.
Yeah, that's just horrifying that they're able to do this. So yeah, if that is my stance on this. Is like don't claim that this is about protecting children when really you're just looking for criminals. You're looking to make something out of nothing.
They're looking to spy on people, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
It's valuable information that they can just, use to sell to advertisers or whoever else. And, just fuck that. I used to work at a computer shop. We fixed computers, that was our thing. And my boss was a cybersecurity expert. He was CISIP certified. He had the highest security clearance that a civilian is allowed to have. This was his specialty. This is the kind of thing that would horrify him, because this is a security frickin' nightmare. You cannot open a back door into someone's device without that back door also being available to hackers. It's not a matter of if they will find it, but when. And this is something that a lot of these people really don't seem to understand when they, propose these things. Let's put in a back door so, the government can get in and get information from criminals. It's okay, but that back door is then going to be there and make everyone vulnerable.
It's if they have nothing to hide, they have nothing to fear. It's say that to the fucking cops that are turning off their body cams. It's if they have nothing to hide, they have nothing to fear.
Also, try telling that to someone who may, for instance, be gay or transgender or whatever, and it has a family who would disown them for that.
Or lives in a country that would have them killed for that.
Yeah. Just, you're not thinking this through and all of the major problems with this, and it's just fucking disgusting.
Speaking of, let's get back onto a nicer topic of Alcazar.
Oh.
Alcazar is such an asshole. Alcazar is such scum and
yeah.
Which, it does lead to one of the best jokes of the entire series, which I know I said in the previous episode, but this is a joke that could only have happened with this cast.
Well, before we get into that, I do want to point out that it's just very funny how everyone assumes Fry doesn't know what a video game is, and his sarcastic response is just pitch perfect.
Yeah, it's great. I loved that.
And did you notice the title of the video game they're playing, which it sends me? Death Factory 3, The Legend of Death Factory 2. It makes me think of something that Mel Brooks said, where he's joked that if he were to make a Spaceballs sequel, he would not do Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money. He would do Spaceballs 3, The Search for Spaceballs 2.
Which I think would be great because it explains why there's such a gap between Spaceballs 1 and 3.
Oh, it would be fantastic, but,
oh yeah, Mel Brooks is hilarious.
He's incredible.
And when they're playing this thing, I always, just as a kid, and hell, even now, I would love when they would depict just video games on TV. Like the Wiffle Man episode of Darkwing Duck, or just anything that would sort of show video games taking place in the context. And I just love the side-scrolling shot with Fred just shooting stuff. It makes me want to play a Futurama video game, not counting the actual Futurama video game.
We'll probably talk about the Futurama video game in a while, because that came out near the end of the show's run.
Yeah.
We could do a special.
Honestly, one of my favorite things to see is when you have television shows talking about video games and getting everything horribly wrong, because it is just hysterical.
I actually wanted to do a YouTube series, or have you seen those astronaut talks about space scenes in movies and everything? I wanted to do that, video game expert talks about video games and movies.
I would watch that. I think it's stuff like the NCIS scene, with the 10 meg pipe.
Or where they have to play Prince of Persia and get through the level to...
Yes, and it's like treated like it's got a level structure, and all of the level 10 text is just in a stock papyrus font.
Yeah, it's you have died. Try again. It's you have to save the Princess Farah. It's which is technically correct, but it completely misses the point of what Prince of Persia is about.
Yeah, or I think my personal favorite is from an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where we see Spike playing a game with holding an Xbox 360 controller. And the sound effects are just from the original Donkey Kong.
Right, Donkey Kong, or in House, where he's playing Metroid Fusion.
I think it was Zero Mission.
Whichever it was a Game Boy Advance one of them, and he gets picked up by the Chozo and it makes it sound like he died. Like, what the fuck? It's what you're supposed to do in that game.
Yeah, that's like, Zero Mission if it's got a Chozo statue.
Look out for the space monkeys on level 4. It's like they're called Edikuns, you uncultured swine.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's, like a copyright issue.
No. It would be, not necessarily could be a copyright issue because like they obviously got the license to show the footage from the game. They should at least get the game right. He wouldn't even have to say that he's like on level 4.
I think it's more a case of just, TV writers who don't know anything about video games aside from like lives and levels and space.
Yeah, then just don't show footage from the game. Because anybody who sees it is going to know that it's wrong.
Thankfully, you don't get that as much nowadays because video games are more of a mainstream thing than they used to be.
True.
Which is one of the big things that I actually have to praise about Big Bang Theory. Pretty much every time they depict something in that show, it's pretty much accurate.
I mean, except the general spirit of the whole thing. Because my issue with the Big Bang Theory is that they just don't understand the mindset of being a geek. Like, they understand what is geeky, but they don't get the why. Like, none of those characters feel real to me.
Well, I've always pointed out that the problem with Sheldon is if you don't like Sheldon, either you've never met someone like Sheldon or you've met too many people like Sheldon.
I don't like Sheldon just because he is a horrible stereotype of all of the worst traits common among autistic people. And it is not pleasant. Man, we keep getting sidetracked. Let's get back to...
because the thing is, there's so much that happens in this episode that was just so enjoyable. There's not really too much to complain about. But the joke that I just fucking love in this episode where she starts calling him Al. And that's Katie Seagal. That's Peggy Bundy doing that. So they have the throwback joke for Married with Children, which was just fucking amazing.
She turns into Peggy Bundy, and they spend the next couple of scenes lampooning sexist old family dynamics in sitcoms that depicted them, complete with an audience laughing.
Which is great because, Married with Children ended in 1997, and this episode was from 2000, so it was still in the cultural zeitgeist. It was still being aired on Fox. This episode may have even aired after an old rerun of Married with Children.
Quite possibly. So, talking about Alcazar, honestly, his, backstory for the Cyclopeans is, I survived the planet's destruction by hiding in a swimming pool. That is almost as ridiculous as Indiana Jones surviving a nuke by hiding in a fridge.
But the joke here is kind of great because you don't know if it's obviously him making it up, but it sounds just silly enough to work within the context of Futurama.
I know the story is made up, but it's still very funny to me how absurd it is. And then, of course, we see the ruins of this civilization that clearly never really existed.
Unfortunately, one of the 40 planets hit was ours.
Yes.
The freaking mole people jealous of the people with one eye.
Well, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
I wonder if with the 5-eyed version, if it was they were attacked by people with 4 eyes.
Well, someone with 5 eyes in the land of the blind would be the God Emperor.
Hey, how many eyes do you... I kind of want to take that joke to logical extremes. Like, in the eye of the 9,999,230,000, the 1 billion-eyed man is king.
What honestly, yeah, Alcazar's complete personality changed the next day, and he just transforms immediately into an awful piece of shit. And I just I know I said this with Fnog in the last episode, but I want to punch this man in his face.
Thankfully, he does get beat up, even more so.
Oh, he does. Much like Fnog, he does get beat up at the end, but rightfully so.
I do love how they managed to kind of lampshades. Do you know how expensive it is to rent a tux that changes shape?
Yes, that's good. That's a good joke. I think my favorite joke in the episode is, though, one of the background gags. Just the signs reading Forbidden Valley, Permitted Valley, and Required Valley.
Yeah, that was fun.
Because it's such a subtle thing, but I love it.
I think I remember hearing somewhere you need, at least 50 or so people to repopulate a civilization.
Genetic diversity?
Yeah. I think I've heard that too.
Yeah. And that's kind of an issue with, trying to repopulate certain animals.
A little bit, yeah. So, an interesting bit of trivia, something that I noticed, one of Alcazar's fiancées kind of resembles the great race of Yith from H.P. Lovecraft's story The Shadow Out of Time. Although she is too small, she's missing a limb, and her head is not yellow. Though Alcazar has the fourth limb, and it seems to be positioned like a tail when he turns into it. So to clarify, the original story described them as these 10-foot tall cones with 4 tentacle-like limbs. 2 of them had claws. One had this trumpet-like organ, and one with a spherical yellow head. So she's close to that, but there were some details missing. So I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of just an artistic depiction of them, because I would not put it past the writers to put that into it, or at least the artists, because they've had other references to these things, and I think they've had the time machine and everything, so they're well read on all this stuff like Lovecraft and H.G. Wells and all this stuff.
Yeah, well, the Great Race of Yith was well after Lovecraft had shifted from traditional horror into his more sci-fi horror era. So, yeah, it definitely makes sense for them to reference that. It's just, as someone who enjoys a lot of classic science fiction and has, enjoyed Lovecraft despite how horrible a person he was, I like that little nod. Especially since they don't even call attention to it. It's just there is a little bonus for people who would notice.
Right.
Why does Bender not just have a goldfish, but 3 goldfish all in separate bowls?
Oh yeah, don't keep goldfish in a bowl, people. It's not good for them. There's not going to be enough water for them to be able to breathe properly.
You want 10 gallons minimum.
Yeah, if you're going to keep a fish, you really do need a full-size tank.
Yeah, if you're keeping it in a bowl, only do it for transport or temporary while you're transferring them to their real tank.
Yes, exactly. Most of what you will hear from a small pet store about how to take care of a goldfish is going to be abusive. And in fact, if someone tells you that goldfish don't live that long, that is actually a lie. They can live for a decade or longer, and they can potentially grow to be massive if they have the space for it. The reason that goldfish kept as pets generally don't live very long is just that they are not kept in good conditions.
Yeah, their average lifespan is actually close to that of a cat. And yeah, they do get big. All members of the carp family just grow according to their, environment.
Which is where the term comes from. You grow to the size of your environment. You grow to the size of your enclosure.
Yeah, I've seen some big koi.
Oh, koi are beautiful.
I mean, you can find goldfish in the same sort of patterns and colors.
That's true. So, at the end of the episode, Leela just wistfully asks, how many planets can there be? And I had to look this up. Recent estimates put it at around 700 quintillion planets, at least.
Wow.
The universe is big.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
But if the universe is infinite, doesn't that mean that there's infinite planets?
It's kind of a paradox, but the universe is simultaneously infinite and not. Because it's infinite, but it's also constantly expanding. Infinity is weird.
Yeah, there's different types of infinity.
Yeah, for instance, infinity plus 1 can be mathematically proven to actually exist.
Right.
Infinity is just a very strange concept that can be very difficult to wrap your brain around. Ultimately, I kind of have mixed feelings about this episode. It's very funny. There's a lot of really good jokes. The plot is interesting. And I love how it focuses and, just spotlights Leela's burning need to learn about herself and where she came from.
Not just learning about herself, but the fact that she is willing to just put herself into such a miserable situation just for her people, that she doesn't even know anything about her people. That it just does depict that she is such a selfless person.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of person she is. She's not necessarily... I wouldn't necessarily call her entirely selfless, because she has been selfish in other episodes, but she is a good person. But where this episode kind of falls apart for me is the plot is about as flimsy as a house of cards, and when you examine it for like 2 seconds, it completely collapses, and you realize that it makes no sense. Just because, like, you have Alcazar with, like, this whole planet of his own, and okay, how did he get that? But even ignoring that and just saying, like, maybe he found, like, this abandoned planet. How do you set all of this up? How do you construct not only an entire castle, but, like, a whole capital city with all of these ruins and all of this artwork, these statues, these frescoes, this whole history? How do you construct all of that in just the tiny length of time between meeting Leela and learning she exists and, like, inviting her to come see you? Because it can't have been that long.
Yeah, maybe he was... honestly, trying to look at this from any realistic standpoint, I just kind of figured that he has sort of a way of like automatic construction of these sort of things and just kind of cloning the civilization. I kind of picture it almost... This would work much better in, like, virtual reality, which they do kind of hint at with the video game stuff at the beginning. But it would work better if it was sort of virtual reality setup where he could just create this world and then just clone it as necessary.
Yeah, I mean, although, again, the way the episode's written, it's very clear that the 5 palaces in these cities are all very real. It's just, how does he build it that fast? Even if he has an automated setup, construction takes time.
Unless they existed beforehand and he looked for specific women based off of what was in those civilizations.
Which is also possible, yeah.
Well, the fact that he was able to find 5, though, I find extremely unlikely. It raises too many questions.
It just raises too many questions.
It does.
It's the kind of thing that doesn't make any sense when you look at it, which, I mean, again, it's not important. That's not the point. The episode is still very enjoyable, even with all of this. It's just, these are the kinds of things that I think about, and I can't turn off that part of my brain.
Yeah.
Like, I'm someone who will normally, say that it's a bad thing to constantly look for plot holes and say that, like, anything that isn't explained perfectly is a plot hole. But in this case, it really does not make any sense, and there isn't really a good way to work it out. Like, because with a lot of things that people claim are plot holes, like, you can easily come up with an explanation that makes perfect sense if you think about it for like 30 seconds. But in this case, the more you think about it, the less sense it makes.
Although it is a lot more forgivable in a comedy, obviously.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think this could be applied to comedies in general, that it's better just not to think about it.
Yeah, the show can definitely get away with a lot more than other anthology-style sci-fi stuff because it's a comedy. You can do a lot of these weird, nonsensical stuff and not have to worry about it because the point is to be funny. In this case in particular, because the episode focused so much on the plot and the characters and the drama, it does still bother me a little bit,
It almost kind of seems like Alcazar's plan is just to find these lonely women and tell them all the same lie, which I was like, does kind of hit close that there are people that would do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to get laid. And as soon as it happens, it's just a complete heel turn. It's like, yeah, now you're just gonna stick around and do stuff for me because we already banged. I have do what you want. I have already won.
Well, I mean, as we saw with Leela, they don't really have any choice. They kind of have to stay because of the whole, we're the last of our kind, and if we don't stay together, this is where the species dies kind of thing. Guilting them into staying with him, which is so fucking disgusting.
Yeah, which definitely is true for how a lot of women kind of get suckered or stuck in abusive relationships. The fact that they believe that they have no other choice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more than just, romantic relationships. Like, guilt tripping can be used to manipulate all sorts of people. Parents manipulating their children, as we pointed out, men manipulating women, but it can be the reverse as well. Or,
of course.
Gay relationships, friendships. It's just...
Abuse doesn't really know any age or gender or specific relationship. It is something that can happen.
Yeah.
God. Fuck Alcazar,
Fuck
really.
Alcazar.
Well, he did get his in the end, so...
Yeah, I want to just grab this asshole shapeshifting cricket and just grab a giant boot and just stomp on him.
I hope Leela and the other girls, catch up now and again.
Yeah, that would actually be nice if Leela got some new friends out of this. Shame we never see them again.
That would be cool if they became recurring characters. That would be neat.
Yeah.
Alas.
There's good designs.
Oh yeah, some very creative aliens, and I like the little touch of the rhino, her voice being very nasal because she has a horn instead of a nose.
Right.
Funny, but fuck Althazar.
Yeah, don't let yourself get catfished on the internet like Leela did, people.
And if you do get catfished, don't get gaslit.
Good advice.
Stay safe, folks.
Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your three voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod. You can hear more episodes of Space Podcast 3000 on YouTube or at soundcloud.com/spacepod3k. You can support the show and listen to new episodes a full week early at patreon.com/spacepod3k. Follow us on Twitter at spacepod3k. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew meet the Professor's heir in A Clone of My Own.